Imagine waking up one morning and everything feels different. The air seems unnaturally still, the sky looks off, and within moments, chaos begins. The Earth has completely stopped rotating for an entire day. Sounds like something out of a science fiction movie, but if this were to actually happen, the consequences would be beyond devastating. To understand how this would unfold, we need to break it down piece by piece. The Earth spins at an incredible speed, with places near the equator moving at over 1,000 miles per hour. This rotation has shaped everything about how life functions: our weather, gravity distribution, ocean currents, and even the way the atmosphere behaves. The moment that rotation stops, everything still in motion would continue moving at its original speed, causing a ripple effect of destruction across the entire planet. One of the most immediate and violent effects would be on the atmosphere. While the ground suddenly stops moving, the air above us would keep going at the same speed as before. This would create winds far more powerful than anything we've ever seen. Imagine hurricanes stronger than any recorded storm, tearing through cities and landscapes with unimaginable force. These winds would be strongest at the equator, where the planet's rotation speed is highest. Entire buildings would be stripped apart, trees ripped from the ground, and anything unsecured would be hurled through the air at deadly speeds. At the same time, the oceans would react violently. Just like the air, water would keep moving. Enormous tsunamis would crash onto coastlines as entire sections of the sea are displaced. Low-lying coastal cities would be among the first to be wiped out. Ships, docks, and infrastructure near the water would have no chance against these unstoppable waves. Even places far from the ocean wouldn't be safe, as rivers and lakes experience similar upheaval, flooding areas that have never seen such extreme conditions before. Beyond the destruction from the atmosphere and oceans, the sudden stop would also affect the very shape of our planet. Right now, Earth isn't a perfect sphere. It bulges slightly at the equator due to the outward force of its spin. Without that rotation, the bulge would begin to shrink and the planet would become more compact. This shift wouldn't happen instantly, but over time, land at the poles would sink slightly, while areas near the equator might experience a rise in elevation. Perhaps the most unsettling effect of all would be what happens to everything on the surface. Because the Earth was moving so fast before stopping, anything not firmly attached to the ground would continue traveling at its previous speed. Cars, buildings, and even people would be thrown forward as if the entire planet had slammed on the brakes. The further away from the poles you are, the worse this effect would be. In places near the equator where the speed was greatest, entire cities would be leveled as objects crash and tumble uncontrollably. It would be one of the most sudden and widespread disasters in Earth's history. And this is just the beginning. The long-term consequences would be just as devastating, from changes in gravity and time to extreme shifts in temperature. In the next part, we'll look at what happens when one side of the world is trapped in daylight, while the other is stuck in total darkness. With the Earth no longer rotating, the concept of day and night as we know it would completely disappear. One half of the planet would face the sun constantly, experiencing never-ending daylight, while the other half would be plunged into complete darkness. This would lead to drastic temperature differences unlike anything life on Earth has ever had to endure. On the side facing the sun, temperatures would skyrocket. Without the usual cycle of day and night, the heat would keep building, turning vast areas into unlivable wastelands. Deserts would become even hotter, while normally mild regions would struggle to handle the extreme conditions. Crops would wither, lakes and rivers would begin drying up, and without relief from nighttime cooling, many places would become too hot for humans to survive. Meanwhile, the side locked in darkness would face the opposite problem. Without sunlight, temperatures would drop to dangerous levels. Cities, forests, and farmlands would be buried under snow and ice, creating a frozen wasteland. The cold would set in fast, making survival difficult without artificial heating. Animals adapted to warm climates wouldn't stand a chance, and entire ecosystems would collapse as plants wither and food chains are disrupted. The differences in temperature between the two sides of the planet would create violent weather systems. Air from the scorching hot side would rush toward the freezing dark side, creating massive storms where the two regions meet. These storms would be unlike anything we've ever seen. Towering clouds, hurricane-force winds, and constant lightning as hot and cold air collide. This extreme weather would last indefinitely, making it nearly impossible for life to recover. Ocean currents, which are normally driven by the Earth's rotation, would also be thrown into chaos. With no rotation to guide them, the natural flow of water would slow down or stop altogether. This would have devastating consequences for marine life, as many sea creatures rely on currents to bring them food and oxygen. The lack of movement in the oceans would lead to stagnation, making large areas uninhabitable for marine ecosystems. Coral reefs, which depend on stable temperatures and water flow, would die off quickly, causing a chain reaction of species extinctions. Without rotation, the Earth's magnetic field would likely weaken over time. This invisible shield protects the planet from harmful solar radiation, but without it, Earth would be bombarded by charged particles from the sun. Over time, this could strip away parts of the atmosphere, allowing even more radiation to reach the surface. The effects on human health would be severe, increasing cancer risks and damaging vital ecosystems. As the planet struggles with its new reality, humans would face an unprecedented challenge: how to survive in a world with extreme heat, freezing cold, violent storms, and a collapsing ecosystem. In the next part, we'll explore how societies would attempt to adapt and what kind of long-term future Earth might have in this new, unrecognizable state. As Earth continues to endure this stillness, humanity would face a complete breakdown in the systems that make modern life possible. The absence of a rotating planet would disrupt everything from agriculture to infrastructure, forcing people to adapt quickly or perish. Agriculture would be one of the first industries to collapse. With one side of the planet in perpetual sunlight and the other in constant darkness, traditional farming methods would no longer work. Crops that rely on a predictable day-night cycle like wheat, corn, and rice would be devastated. Even if crops could grow in certain areas, the extreme temperatures would either burn them or freeze them, making large-scale food production impossible. The supply chain would fall apart, and without food, nations would face famine and widespread starvation. With the Earth's magnetic field weakened, communication and navigation systems would also be deeply impacted. Satellites, which depend on Earth's magnetic field for orientation and power, would likely lose their function. GPS systems that guide everything from airplanes to shipping containers would become unreliable. Even everyday technology like mobile phones would become useless in many parts of the world, leading to isolation. The breakdown of global communication would increase confusion, panic, and chaos. Without the ability to accurately communicate or navigate, the world would struggle to organize any meaningful relief efforts. People living in coastal areas would face an additional problem. The oceans would still be in motion, creating massive tidal waves and tsunamis that would devastate shorelines. These waves could easily swallow entire cities, forcing millions of people to evacuate to higher ground. But without a reliable global communication network or functioning infrastructure, escape plans would be chaotic, and many would be trapped in flooded regions. The human cost of this stillness would also be staggering. As resources run out, conflicts would arise. Without crops to harvest and no reliable way to transport goods, countries would turn against one another in competition for what little is left. Food, water, and shelter would become the most valuable resources, leading to widespread violence. Nations would struggle to maintain order, and governments would collapse under the pressure of dealing with both natural disasters and the breakdown of society. In places where governments managed to stay intact, martial law could be declared, and the military might take control in an effort to maintain some sense of order. In addition to the social chaos, healthcare would face its own set of challenges. The extreme temperature shifts would cause outbreaks of heat-related illnesses on one side of the planet and hypothermia on the other. The collapse of medical infrastructure and transportation would prevent the distribution of essential medicines, vaccines, and equipment, leading to further suffering and loss of life. And as food shortages persist, malnutrition would become a widespread problem, further weakening already fragile societies. For most people, survival would be the primary concern. People would need to find ways to shelter themselves from the extreme cold and heat while searching for food and water, but these efforts would likely be temporary. As the planet's ecosystems unravel, the entire biosphere would struggle to survive in its new state. The long-term viability of life on Earth would become increasingly uncertain. As we conclude our exploration into this scary hypothetical, we'll discuss how Earth might recover, if it could at all, from such a cataclysmic event. Would it ever return to its natural rotation, or would this new world be permanent? Let's take a look at the potential future of a planet frozen in place. As the Earth remains motionless for 24 hours, the planet would eventually attempt to recover, though the damage done would be profound and irreversible. It's difficult to imagine how Earth could go back to normal after such an event, but let's explore the possible future of this new, still world. first, let's consider how Earth's rotation might return. The planet wouldn't just resume spinning immediately after 24 hours of stillness. The sudden stop would have created a massive disruption in the planet's momentum. Any attempt to start rotating again would involve gradual changes in the Earth's internal dynamics. This means that even if the Earth did somehow begin spinning once more, it would take a long time for its rotation to regain the speed it had before. The aftermath of this event would be far-reaching, leaving permanent scars on the environment and ecosystem. The atmosphere, which had been pushed around by the Earth's motion, would also need time to regain stability. If Earth started rotating again, air currents and weather systems might initially be chaotic. Winds, storms, and temperature swings could persist for years as the atmosphere adjusted back to its normal patterns. The damage to ecosystems would not be easily reversed either. Many species would have been wiped out by the extreme heat or cold, and the disruption of ecosystems would cause imbalances in food chains. Without the regular cycle of day and night, certain plant species would not survive, and herbivores that depend on them for food would be greatly affected. The oceans, which had continued to move while Earth stood still, would eventually settle, but the effects of the tsunamis and massive waves would leave long-lasting scars on coastal regions. Cities that had once been bustling with life might now be submerged, and the rebuilding process would take generations, if it was even possible. Some nations might attempt to relocate inland, while others could abandon entire regions, choosing to rebuild further from the coastlines. Entire cities might be lost to the ocean forever. As for the global social order, the world would face a difficult road to recovery. The power structures that existed before the event would likely collapse under the strain of trying to rebuild. Countries would need to rely on new forms of leadership, whether local or global, to navigate the aftermath. The struggle for resources would only intensify as populations would have been decimated, and the remaining survivors would need to collaborate to rebuild what was lost. However, with so much infrastructure destroyed, it would take a long time before the world could return to anything resembling normality. Global communication systems, weakened by the destruction of satellites, would need to be reestablished, and nations might struggle to coordinate efforts without reliable means of contact. Despite all these challenges, there is hope. After the initial chaos, life could begin to rebuild in pockets of the Earth where survival is possible. Communities might adapt to their new reality, perhaps relying on renewable energy sources, sustainable farming practices, and technologies that can endure extreme conditions. Humanity's resilience could push it to find new ways of surviving in this unpredictable world. However, it is also possible that some regions of the Earth would remain uninhabitable for the long term. Entire ecosystems might collapse, and it might take centuries for the planet to return to any semblance of balance. For human civilization, adapting to this new world would take time, possibly longer than anyone could predict. In the end, this thought experiment about Earth freezing in place for 24 hours helps us realize how fragile our planet truly is. The planet's delicate balance relies on forces we often take for granted, like its rotation and the consistent weather patterns it creates. While this scenario is highly unlikely, it serves as a reminder that even small changes can have a significant impact on life as we know it. What would Earth look like after such an event? In truth, it's hard to say, but it would certainly be a world far different from the one we live in now, and the challenges would be daunting. But as humans, we've faced difficult circumstances before, and we might find a way to adapt once more.